From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, welcome to Space Brains, the show where we watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya, it's episode 89.
Hi, I just thought I'd jump in here. We do have a slight numbering of episodes issue. Due to scheduling difficulties, we've had to bring forward episode 89, which is this one you're listening to now, and skip episode 88. Episode 88 will be coming to you shortly. Don't you worry about that. So otherwise, continue and enjoy episode 89.
And we are talking about the science fiction film, The Day the Earth Caught Fire. Came out in 1961. In this episode, we'll reveal what we thought about the film, the ins and outs of narrative and film language, plus a nice deep dive into a specific piece of science that the filmmakers are proposing. Maybe something to do with the Earth being on fire would be my guess, but stay tuned to later in the episode when Surrey will talk all things sciencey from The Day the Earth Caught Fire. This film was directed by Val Guest, who also co-wrote it with Wolf Mankiewicz.
The good old Wolf.
Wolf.
And Val Guest.
I said that.
Britain and... Okay. But anyway, this is your chance to go back and watch this film because we have our spoiler warning. We're going to talk all about every feature of this film.
Warning.
Go back and watch it. It's a pretty cool film if you
awesome
don't
movie.
mind the pun. And then tune back in and find out what we have to say about it.
This movie is on fire.
It's fire.
It's hot. It's hot and spicy. The British science fiction disaster film, The Day the Earth Caught Fire, is where the weather turns apocalyptic. Sorry?
It turns very suddenly hot in Britain, where we are based in this film, but it also demonstrates it's extremely cold in New York.
Yes.
So that's unusual, of course, because they should both either be in summer or winter, not one getting too hot and the other one too cold.
So the weather is the bad guy in this film, due to the fact the Americans and the Russians both detonated a nuclear bomb at the same time, and this awful weather starts kicking it up a gear, breaking all sorts of records, causing all sorts of disasters, and really not making it very nice to live in London where the film is set. The key characters realise that the atomic explosions set the Earth on a weird 11-degree tilt.
11-degree tilt and an 11-degree shift in the orbit or something?
And started to shift the actual Earth towards the sun, causing these apocalyptic weather changes. The story focuses in on an alcoholic, divorcee, depressed journalist at the Daily Mail who slowly uncovers the truth of the story by cleaning up his own life to only realise how helpless it is for the masses in this situation. So what was your number one takeaway from The Day the Earth Caught Fire, Surrey?
Well, my number one takeaway is that in London there's something called heat mist.
Heat mist, yeah.
Which...
It's moist.
It's
sticky.
Realised that I'd never even thought about that or heard of it, but as soon as it was mentioned, I realised that I guess it must be a real thing.
Yeah.
Just
for us
like...
down under, it's not quite a thing.
The atmospheric conditions for, say, fog or something are similar in that if you have the warm air suddenly hitting a cold patch, then you get the humidity squeezed out of the air and you get fog. And we get that a little bit sometimes inland here.
Yeah.
But along the Thames there, where you've got this river inlet and you get a cool day turning to then a hot day, you end up with suddenly this water that's been sitting around on the streets and everything evaporating into like a low-lying fog. And it was, I don't know, it was a revelation to me. I went, yeah, oh, wow, you actually have enough water lying around to have it visible in the air. So, folks that live, say, in Portugal and, say, most of California and, Arizona, you probably would be equally shocked to hear of this phenomena that there's water that can just, appear. Wow, okay. Wow. So, but it was interesting, and that really shouldn't have been a takeaway from this film. But
it was educational, this film, for Surrey.
It was. I never thought about it, because when in this film the heat mist is coming in, I thought it was a sort of a slightly dodgy special effect of a wave, like a tidal wave roaring up the river, and it was going to wash everyone away.
No.
Which why it didn't quite make sense, the reactions people were having initially. Turns out it was just like a really big, heavy, thick mist that was coming in. Surprise! But there you go. I mean, this isn't. There's probably these people in London going, "You've never heard of a heat mist? What about a pea soup fog?" And you're like, "Well, okay. I've flown in an aeroplane that went through a cloud once. Not here in WA. We don't get those clouds. I mean, we get aeroplanes."
Yes.
So there you go.
It's very educational. I promise the film is much cooler than what Surrey's making it sound out.
Hey, if you were me, you'd be thinking that was very cool.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, that was the number one takeaway from this is the...
Oh, well, that's a number two takeaway.
Yeah, the number two takeaway here was the interesting take on the male gaze and gender roles in 1960s Britain. So... I was discussing this with a fellow film aficionado after the film about this, and watching some of the late 90s, early noughties sort of action films nowadays, you sort of cringe a bit at the way women are treated and the way men are sort of portrayed. And whilst in this 1961, this film is, there's obviously male gaze here and sort of, but it's really obvious and oddly enough not so creepy in its honesty.
Yeah.
As in, the lady reaches over the table to get the piece of paper, and it's not like, that little heated sort of heavy breathing and the slow pan close-up. The guys actually do look across and openly admire her bottom and sort of nod to one another, and, there's sort of, fit, And then she gets back up and hands the thing back, and they nod and smile, and yeah, you sort of go, okay, it's a bit over the top there, but it lacked the creepy voyeurism of the late 90s, early noughties. I think so. That was pretty good too.
Yeah, it was definitely. I noticed that in terms of they kind of were referencing the characters gazing. But it wasn't the voyeuristic look of just the camera gazing.
Yeah, it didn't make me feel dirty. No. It made me look at these two guys and go, okay, you're from the 60s, obviously.
Yeah, like but even that itself, and I think in that scene you're talking about, Jennings, the main character, also makes a reference to her, and she's actually quite quick-witted and gets back at him. So he's the one left looking a bit shoddy. Whereas, as you're saying, if you do take something very more in the 90s, 80s, whatever, maybe even still today, you get those voyeuristic looks where the woman is totally, demonized almost.
She's being groped by the camera.
She is.
And as an audience member, you kind of feel a little bit dirty. Like
you do.
You go,
unless it's that kind of movie. And then you're like, oh, yeah, bring it on.
But then you bring back a bit of honesty there,
Totally, and that's what they did here. It wasn't the camera was just actually observing this kind of, and it wasn't so much that he was being super seedy. He was just being a male of the 1960s. But the woman, I liked that she was quipping him back and giving it back to him. She wasn't just a dotting. Oh, guys will be guys.
She was that. Who's that famous Hollywood actress who was known for her...
Marilyn Monroe?
No. Yeah. I mean, she was fantastic, of course, but no, it's like... I don't know. I'm going to lose that one. Okay. It's a famous name. You'd recognise. Just pretend I said this really famous woman's name that... she's famous for her rather sharp-witted comebacks, particularly to men, that kind of put them in the place. But I can't remember who it is now.
If you're out there and you know who Surrey is,
I'll edit it back in there and slip my mind
Let
for the
us
time
know.
being. But anyway,
Send me a message.
Let's move on, shall we? From this,
shall.
was this
We shall, young chaps.
was this a message of movie of warning, hope, experiment?
Total warning, many ways, I think. There's actually quite a few warnings in this. I mean, global warning. It's interesting, I think, because, well, look, basically straight away, the setup, the catalyst is that the Russians and the Americans have detonated nuclear bombs during the 60s, Cold War, and that lasted, from World War II, didn't it? They kept
Pretty
going,
much.
really, the Cold War, World War II, 1940s, all the way up until somewhere in the early 90s.
91 officially.
The Russian kind of couldn't keep up with the States and they dropped away, and the Cold War kind of, the Berlin Wall, all those kind of historical moments. So this is 1961. It's really the heart, I think, of the height of all
we're
this
still
stuff.
having the whole
We haven't had
duck
the
and,
hippies yet.
the duck and cover
Yeah.
warning messages from the in America, where they're
Yeah.
telling school kids to cover their heads because that'll save them.
Go into a desk. Yeah, that will save you from a nuclear weapon. So to me, it's the height of that. They've both detonated these bombs and they've screwed up the Earth, and then the rest of us have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like that's a pure warning. But then I think when you dig a bit deeper, it's also there's some more specific warnings, like trying to affect the planet and the weather being the actual outcome. So here you've got two superpowers fighting it out, but then it's actually like the dangers of messing with the environment, which that's what I joked about global warming. Well, yeah, this film almost shows us quite a lot of the things that we're going through now of global warming, really, like really extreme temperatures, temperatures being broken. This heat mist that, sure, for Londoners, they might have a heat mist, but I think this was an extreme heat
This was
mist.
normally
Four
it's
stories high.
I think that's maybe a couple feet off the ground.
Yeah, you couldn't see anything, so, and, then they have that big storm and then the weather and then the dust bowl and, it's all those things that we are seeing slowly with global warming, but this obviously good old film has sped it up. And I think also that, and when I looked into a bit of this, that good old Wolf Mankiewicz, he was a Jewish immigrant as a kid into the UK. He survived the Blitz. Okay, now in the Blitz in the UK was when, the Germans were bombing them.
Oh, gee, that was only like 20 years before this film.
Yeah, and it affected a lot of his writing because Wolf has written a lot of stuff, plays, films, books. He's got a really well-known novel, and him and Val have also made a couple of films together. But this one in particular, you could see how the way this story is crafted, we see through the eyes of the fact that we're not the government, we're not the military experiences, we're journalists and we're the everyday people. Wolf is kind of basically showing us what it would be like. We're in the dark from the government and we don't know how severe all of this is going to be.
Part of the whole second act is about trying to extract information from the Department of Weather or the Bureau of
Bureau of Meteorology
Atmosphere or something. Where the heck
and then figure out when they do sort of realise the truth, well, what's going to be done about it? And no one really knows, right? Like no one's revealing it. So I think that, there's a lot of warnings going on in this. That it's sort of... it's interesting because I think he went through the Blitz and he probably dealt with, the English government information, a power bigger than themselves, the Germans attacking. In this case, it's then the weather attacking. So, there's a big warning there to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite classic. It's a disaster born from humanity's hubris.
Yeah.
And then we've got to try and negotiate that. I think that's a common theme in warning stories, as opposed to experiments where it might be, people find this interesting situation and it's difficult.
Yeah.
As opposed to people have set off nuclear bombs and are going to destroy the world.
Well, the classic is like a zombie film, isn't it, where the scientists were experimenting on monkeys and the monkey bit the scientist or whatever. It's like, why were you experimenting that, on this severe virus or whatever?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you let the virus out of the lab, right? Like it's that old...
Yeah, the genie comes out of the bottle.
Yeah, and that's the same here, really. It's like, what if the Russians and the Americans, which were detonating nuclear bombs at that point in time, what if they did cause this huge destruction?
And they were one-upping each other.
That's right.
The Russians detonated their Tsar bomber, which is the largest nuke ever dropped. It was 50 megatons. Absolutely ridiculous. It was kind of good that they did, though, because the information that came out of that bomb drop basically indicated that there's a maximum useful size of a nuclear weapon for its use as a weapon. Because you get to a certain size, the Tsar bomber, you drop that on a city and you level a city. But it's a very big and very heavy bomb, and whoever dropped it is also going to get caught by it. A bomb 1/5 the size, like 10 megatons, will do the same job.
Yeah.
You've got an inverse cube law in terms of your volumetric displacement of material, which is when you're blowing something up. The more stuff you've got to try and blow up, it's 1 cube less effective each incremental power. So you've got to go 8 times more powerful to get twice the effect. And there's a certain point where you're better off just cutting it by 8 times and only get half the effect. Just use 2 of those. That's a whole lot cheaper. And so it was good, because otherwise it could well have meant that people would keep building bigger and bigger bombs. And
bigger is not always better.
It just doesn't scale that way. In fact, you're better off with anyway, we go into the economics of nuclear weapons at another time.
But in this film, it's suggested that the Russians and the Americans here are kind of
at the time they were,
which was what they were doing
in history. They were taking turns blowing up bigger bombs.
Yeah,
and
mine's bigger than yours.
Yeah, and so I guess the question there, the what if here scenario is, well, what if they just kept blowing up ever bigger bombs? What's that going to do? Yeah.
And here it's a total disaster. So we got to see this film part of the Perth Horror Film Festival. So we got to see it on the big screen, which was excellent. There was a really attentive, engaged audience, which was great. We all sort of had a bit of a chuckle at a couple of times. I think we probably enjoyed the gaze and the commentary on the male sort of behaviour. I think lots of people probably enjoyed the sort of special effects being a little bit old.
There was some genuinely good humorous interchange of dialogue as well. Like the dialogue was quite well written. It was very witty and machine gun fire sort of back and forth.
It was great, actually, the dialogue. And it felt like maybe some people in the audience, this was a film... There was mention that I think they had struggles to get the copy of the film. Like they had permission to play the film, but they had an issue getting it here due to COVID times, and someone in the audience had a copy. So the audience was this kind of mixed bag of people that were really attentive, really engaged, very much either in love of the genre or... maybe they've seen this film multiple times. For me, it was my first time I've seen this. How about you, Sorry?
Yeah, absolutely first time. I'd never heard of this before. Perhaps someone had said the name at some point in my history, but as far as I can tell, I've never heard of this film.
And what was your first reaction, you think, once those credits rolled?
It was a mixed bag, because initially it comes up and it's an amber reddish hue to the whole thing. Like it's a black and white film, but the opening, it's got this orangey hue to the whole deal. Yeah. And it looks a lot like these movies we saw. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It sort of had this same sort of opening, really. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers had that same sort of opening, bit of a voiceover and a fellow it sort of started towards the end and then it recapped back.
Yeah.
And then likewise Soylent Green also had a similar sort of opening. So it was in that genre, so I was sort of expecting that. But what I wasn't expecting, which caught me by surprise, is this is a British science fiction film.
Yeah.
And it has a distinctly different feel to it.
It does.
The camera work, the editing, the dialogue, the interaction and interplay of the characters, all just decidedly British.
Yeah. Yeah,
very much so.
Yeah.
And so that pleased me. It very quickly indicated that it was going to be a different sort of film compared to some of these other Hollywood films we'd seen of this, age.
Yeah.
And that intrigued me. So it lured me in very quickly. I think with the camera cuts and the movement of the camera, which is unusual for this time period.
Yeah.
They didn't do a lot of moving cameras or quick cuts.
Yeah, for sure.
And how about you? What did you notice about the difference, say, between the British style and the Hollywood style?
Well, I think the fact that this isn't like I don't mean superheroes in Captain Marvel, but I mean like the hero is a journalist. But he's not a journalist that's about to pull out a, AK-47 and take on the Russian military.
He's not an ex-military, war zone reporter.
No, and I think also he's deeply flawed due to, he's gone through a bit of a nasty divorce and only gets to see his child randomly and is kind of, I guess, bitter and given up on life. So he's quite an ironic character, isn't it? It's almost like he's given up at life, and at the start of the film, and I mean like not the start where he wanders along and tells us the start of the story, but I just mean the actual start of the story. He, in his life's journey, he's kind of given up when the rest of the world is ticking along and this disaster starts happening. Yeah, which means the end is coming. Perfect for an alcoholic, depressed person that's given up, but in fact that kind of engages him and starts to bring him back into obviously his old investigative journalism sort of style. So he's a hero because he knows he's got the gift of the gab and can kind of try to sneakily get the story out of people when others can't, and then write that story to tell the masses. So it's a bit of an everyday hero, and I think that when you think about that type of character, that is quintessentially English. It's not the underdog like Australians, but it's definitely trying to be the average Englishman in a way. They're representing that they're intelligent, they're a bit dog-eyed, but they're not the big macho superhero, person that you get, John Wayne. Maybe I'm just trying to think who's in the 1960s in the States, but that sort of hero of the day that's going to stand up to the big bad force. The other thing, I guess, and we have done the warning, you'll find this in Australian films as well, is like the ending. Well, it does end, and it's a very satisfying ending. You and I were just saying about non-satisfying endings before we pressed the record tonight. It is a satisfying ending, this one, but it's not that sort of traditional everything is wrapped up. It's sort of left a little bit open to whether the Earth is saved or not. Yeah, and I think, but he is saved, right? I think
one of the reasons it is satisfying is because it is true to the theme and nature of the film. Yeah, you're talking about it's an everyday person who's the hero, and we're taken from the point of view of the common people. We're not following, the Prime Minister or the President of the United States or an Army General or an Air Force Captain who's on hard times but then has to fly and kick us.
Yeah, it's not
missile or something.
It's not Tom Cruise coming out of retirement.
It's like an ordinary dude who's been kept in the dark, and they're trying to fight to get some sort of a truth. And the ending keeps that kept in the dark, looking for the truth, feeling to it.
It's interesting, eh?
Which leaves it, and because I think it's because it stays true to that you leave the film going, that was really, really interesting, very cool. I came out feeling somewhat optimistic. Yeah. But it leaves it ambiguous in a satisfying way, I think.
Yeah, and that's more English, so definitely more European cinema.
Yes.
Than Hollywood cinema.
Well, if we looked at the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which was 1956, so 5 years earlier, that finishes with a totally everything saved and we're all okay. Yeah. All the trucks were intercepted, the pod people were captured, and the military's taking control of everything. Everything's good. Yeah. And that's how it ends. And you think, okay. Whereas it very easily could have been left with, we managed to run down 2 trucks. How many did you say there were? Yeah. And he's like, I don't recall. Or maybe there was 2, or was there 3? I'm not sure. It could have left it ambiguous of like, are we all pod people? But it didn't. Yes, okay, that's pretty good.
Did you have a favourite scene?
I really enjoyed the scene where, what's the main character's name again?
Peterson.
Yeah, Peterson and his new girlfriend. I'm just not being very Jeannie.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, this. To be fair, this was a week or so ago. I watched this, so got to be a little bit forgiving of me. Yeah. So Peter Stenning, is that it?
Yeah.
Peter. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So Peter goes into Jeannie's apartment, and he's wet from the rain, and there's just this sort of interesting interplay where he's sort of going, well, we could make a night of this, and Jeannie's like, yeah, I mean, you're nice, but I'm really not sold on you. It's just not what I'm up for.
No.
And he pushes his case a little bit.
Yeah.
But when she says, look, no, sorry, it's just not going to happen, he goes, oh, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah. And then it's just kind of this background joke of him being a hotel lodger. And it was quite a charming little interchange of, I suppose, an insight into that 60s British concept as well. There was no sort of melodrama involved, and there was a bit of self-deprecating humor in it and quips back and forward. And Jeannie didn't say that there's not a chance you're a creep or anything. She was just like, yeah, well, you're a bit fresh at the moment. It's let's give this a couple of days and see how it settles in, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah.
But it was entertaining the whole time. You're just wondering, is this gonna be like a home run for this guy? Because he's alcoholic, and he's clearly still torn up about his divorce. So it's probably not a good thing for him, but maybe it would be. And then it's probably not a good thing for her because he is a bit messed up. And so it goes on, and it leads you on for a little bit back and forth, but it ends so nicely. In fact, I think this is where he decides that he's only going to be drinking instant coffee. Yeah. He stops booze, and he starts refusing it. Yeah, because it's like he's found purpose in his life. So that's like this character turning point. So that scene was very entertaining. It's a lot of sort of a bit of a double entendre talking, and
there was some
quick
awesome
back and
dialogue.
forward, and very entertaining. I don't know how they wrote that dialogue without genuinely. Maybe they did get actors to act it out, and they go, "Oh no, not quite. Change it here. Now try that one."
Well, I think looking into Wolf's background, he has written a lot, so I think it's just probably a master writer really playing it out there.
Yeah, so maybe he's seen it enough now. He can just rip it out.
I mean, I think the more you write, the better you get. And Wolf, as before this script, he had a really well-known novel. He's written a couple other plays. I mean, and they're all quite successful at that time. And he kept going on and having a career like this. So his whole adult life was writing. So yeah.
Was there some sort of aspect or feature in this film that caught you? I was going to say normally the question would be what sort of science, but this is a historic piece. So what sort of speculation or insight into Britain, did you get from this you like?
Well, I think what I probably said before, that the global warming thing, I mean, it's kind of, we look at global warming and it's the frog in hot water, meaning that, the planet is slowly warming up and we're not reacting quick enough because we are like frogs in boiling water.
It's hard to take a small change now and extrapolate that into big dangers.
I can walk along. We very lush here where we live in Mandurah, Western Australia. You can walk along the coast, and at this time of year, you see, the ocean's fired up. It's ripping away the sand, and quite naturally doing that. But then I've been doing this for the last 6-7 years, walking along the coast here, and you start to go, oh, that tide is a lot higher than maybe it came up last winter. But I wouldn't scientifically be able to tell you that. That's just sort of purely observational. So I don't actually know. But then I think, okay, but then it goes back, and summer looks nice again and all tropical and beautiful and all those sorts of things. But then maybe next winter it comes up a little bit higher again, and it just starts damaging the structural integrity of the coastal lining here where we are in Western Australia. But again, it's a frog in hot water, isn't it? Because every year it does that, and maybe it creeps up a little bit higher. But I mean, even in my lifetime, maybe it's not going to kill me.
Yeah. Or it may not even damage one of the houses. Yeah.
In our children's lifetime, it might rip away the whole coastal line. I don't know.
That's why my house is on the hill.
The estuary could rise by a couple of meters. But hey, if you're in Papua New Guinea or Fiji
or the Maldives,
I mean, the next 10 years are probably a bit do or die with how fast that's going to rise. So but I liked, and quite often these disaster movies do this, and I do feel, because I had not seen this film before, there's films like Moonfall, in fact, anything by Roland Emmerich, big Hollywood director, makes all of those disaster films. But The Day After Tomorrow, which is kind of, fast forwarding global warming, and even Independence Day, this film does a lot of that. Oh, it even mentions Western Australia, doesn't it? At one point. We all cheered at that.
Yes.
Which was, again, how engaged the audience was.
We were getting rain, apparently.
We were getting heaps of rain. Wow.
Righto.
Which would be, equivalent for us. So but it did do that, this film, where it talked about some of the cities and a weather pattern and extremities going on across the world. And that reminded me of, Independence Day, how you have that sequence of cities, and Sydney's one of them, isn't it? It gets blown up by the alien ship, and quite often in these films that's what they do. They show New York and Sydney and Beijing and London, and it's disasters in all those zones. So that stood out to me in this film, is that what global warming could look like if it was like put on fast forward really quickly, because London changed from a really wet, normal probably London, or just a bit too wet. Like they were kind of joking at the start of the film that it was a bit too wet. Then all of a sudden it was warm, and then they had the warm mist, and then they were in there's the other way around. I'm going there. So it was really wet, and then they had temperatures higher than ever. They broke all the records, and then they had the heat mist, and then straight away after the heat mist, they had a real sort of wild storm, that kind of like a cyclone, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, cars have been blown over and all sorts,
Yeah, so they kind of went through that very quickly, and then they were out of water.
I'd be curious to know, I didn't look this up, and perhaps one of our glorious listeners who is more historically oriented, the history of disaster films, where does this one, like...
Yes,
because it follows
timeline.
A pattern, as you said, and there's certain imagery and tropes used, which I've definitely seen following on from this in movies in the 70s and 80s and the 90s, where there was a bit of a big boom of disaster films again, where there was they even remade the Poseidon Adventure again or something, apparently. But there was Daylight, I think it was called, which is Stallone being trapped in a tunnel. And then there's like Dante's Peak. And then there's like
that's the other ones,
some sort of volcano. Twister. And on they go. There's a whole bunch of them, but they all sort of follow the global ones, or sort of follow a similar pattern. And I'm just wondering, is this one of the first movies to do that? Is it that being acted as a bit of a template blueprint?
Yeah. So, I mean, and at Armageddon and Deep Impact, that they sort of do it. Deep Impact does it a bit differently, because it actually does take us through those different characters' storyline. But Armageddon definitely follows that very traditional,
so if you are a bit of a cinema history buff
on disaster
movies, like maybe I'll look it up after the show, but let's find out. That'd be great.
Okay, so just quickly before we get into the plot, what's happening with Spacebrains Science Fiction Film Festival?
Well, the film festival is on again. We've already started.
What?
Yeah, we've
second year
already started getting entries in the early bird.
We have.
I would recommend that you get cracking, either make a film or finish post-production on your latest film.
Yep, get it in.
We've got student category. We've got music video.
Ooh.
So if you're a music act and you've got a somewhat science fiction-y theme or a little story in your video clip, get it into us.
Definitely.
We want to see those. We've got, there's feature film as well, and any number of other, best actors and so forth. So if you're an actor in a science fiction film, get onto your director, writer, producer and say, hey, why am I not in Spacebrains? I did a fantastic job and I should win a prize.
You definitely should. So all the information you can find out at filmfreeway.com. No, that's just .com. Was where you can enter your film. If you don't know about Film Freeway, go check it out. But of course, you can find us on our website and socials, all the information. Don't hesitate to ask some questions. But I think it's all pretty self-explanatory. But if you're a filmmaker, start cracking. Make a film.
Get in there.
We'd love to see it. Okay, so let's get stuck into the plot of The Day the Earth Caught Fire.
Yeah, okay, well, it starts off, a guy drops a match, woof, it goes up, bam, end of story.
The end,
End of
credits.
story. Well, yeah, so The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961, directed by Val Guest, written by Wolf Mankiewicz and Val Guest, and it stars, obviously, sadly enough, apparently Michael Caine was one of the police constable.
Yeah,
I was going to say this is 60 years ago now.
Yeah.
61 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't really recognise any of these names here.
Well,
but
the thing is, Edward Judd plays Peter Stenning, and I kind of recognised him a bit, but not majorly. But McKern, as his offsider,
yes,
he's very recognisable.
I do recognise him somewhere.
As Bill Maguire, and Janet Munro, I don't know, but that doesn't mean anything.
No, that doesn't mean anything.
I'm not a huge 1960s British cinema kind of fiend.
No, they're probably all big names at the time.
They probably were. So quite often actors in this era were very good play actors and TV actors and film actors, especially in Britain. Interesting enough, just another little side note on Wolf was he was kicking around the first James Bond script with a couple other writers.
Oh, yes.
And one of the other writers owned the character of James Bond. Whatever the backstory is there, I don't know. Look into it for us. And Wolf decided after a while that he wasn't liking it and wanted to get his name away from James Bond as much as possible. Probably regretted that decision.
It's going to flop.
Yeah, he was starting to feel... He thought it was a bit of a stinky idea, and he withdrew his kind of support of it.
No.
So he came back years later. They got him back involved in it, and I think even maybe... I don't know, Casino Royale or something, one of the ones. I don't know which one it was. Something a bit more recent in the 90s, whatever he was involved in. So, yeah, probably missed that boat, unfortunately. Wolf made a bit of a bad decision.
So the film was shot in London and southeast England. Principal photography included Fleet Street, Battersea Park, and little bit here I recognise the Pink Floyd album, which has the famous smokestacks of Battersea industrial, what is it, generator.
Yes.
In the background. I can't remember which album that was.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's probably
which
like
one
Pink
that
Floyd fans listening going, you can't remember the name of that. But anyway, there you go.
And the actual Daily Mail, they shot in the Daily Mail.
Oh, that was a real mail. There you go.
Yeah.
And in Brighton, the Palace Pier and so forth, because the fun park is a bit of a location in this film.
Yes.
The budget, and £190,000. It doesn't make much sense to me. That would be, in today's money, that's what, $400,000 Australian?
Still not bad.
Which isn't a bad, budget, considering the locations involved and, some actors. You could actually film this at that budget today if you picked some cheap actors and didn't mind going for a bit of equity, that sort of thing.
And good old Val said that people weren't super interested, so he did a deal where he gave up his profits from a previous film he had done called Espresso Bongo, which was a huge box office hit for Val a few years earlier. So he gave up his profits as collateral to make this film.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And
this film was successsul.
Yes, it made a small profit.
Made a small profit at the time, but it was actually considered a critical and commercial success.
As some other filmmakers have said, that if the producers or the investors get their money back plus what are their required interest, they don't care how big a profit it is, so long as they made their money back.
But that is a question that maybe we can raise with producers in the future, so we can have that conversation on Spacebrains and find out, what is... I've heard that some other investors, they look at a 10% return is what they want. So, the ones that... But it's a complicated thing. I know Luke Sparks talked about this a fair bit online, and there's a couple other producers I know, they talk about, they're happy to make films, but they want to get about that 10% return on their investment. So, yeah, you can understand if they didn't really like a film. It's interesting, not sci-fi, but I watched another British film called Sing. Is it called Sing? Sing? Yeah, and it won the Oscar for the best song. Called Sing? Oh,
That's that one with a pig in it, right?
no. I know Sing. Yeah, that's Sing like that. Maybe it's not called Sing. What's it called? Something music, song. I don't know now. Oh, just...
I know you'd pull in at me.
I know, I am. You've caught your disease. But anyway, and that was the same thing. That director, he gave up his fee just to make the film, and he gave his fee to the actors.
Very nice.
Yeah, like he just to pay them, so he got no pay for the film. But luckily enough, the film went on, was a huge success, won an Oscar and blah blah blah. So, yeah. So we like to break the narrative structure into a good old fashioned 3-act structure. You need that satisfactory end, don't you, Surrey?
You do.
As you experienced recently. Not that we'll name names, but...
No, there was a movie I watched recently where I was like... it left me flat.
Yeah.
Like, the film finished and I was sitting there going, what, is that it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so the whole point, and this film does it very well, is you need at least a 3-act structure, and that 3-act structure needs to be set up with something super interesting and characters that are engaging and worthy for the audience to follow for 90 minutes or for 120 minutes or whatever, right? Like, so the film needs to start with an act 1 where we have an interesting opening image. We got to get involved and get stuck into what is this film about. And we got to pretty quickly, around the 12-minute mark roughly, have an inciting incident or a catalyst or something that we as the audience go, yeah, okay, now this is what this film's about.
Yeah.
And we have to be invested in that audience. We've got about that 12-minute mark. I've mentioned it before, Aaron Sorkin, Oscar-winning screenwriter, written great stuff for TV as well. He's like, movies, people are there in the dark. They've got, you've paid $15. They'll hang around for a bit, but after a while, if they don't like it, like you were just saying, not satisfied, they can just leave. So they want their money's worth, and so you've got to hook them with that inciting incident. From there needs to be a bit of a debate, like a bit of a questioning of the scenario of like, do I do this or do I not do that? And then they make a decision which kind of hurtles them into the second act. And what happens in that second act? Sorry.
Well, the second act is going to further what we call the plot. So it takes this catalyst event, and you probably have a few questions in your mind, like, well, how's this going to work out? What's that going to happen? It's like, and the second act is going to start out by starting to play with the answers to that. Start showing the results of this. We have I guess it's the fun and games. It's you've referred to it as a trailer.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of movie trailers, they'll usually have maybe one quick shot from the opening intro, and then they'll have a whole bunch of quick, snapshots out of the second act, and they'll leave the third act completely out of the trailer. But in the middle of the second act, you're going to have a midpoint. So this is a point where we've kind of explored the initial obvious premise, the promise of the premise. We've had that delivered. Cool, that's what we want. Now it's got to get serious. All the repercussions of the decisions and actions made, and maybe some further development which drives the story towards it. You can see now the story is heading to a conclusion. Like, you can't just keep building up and up and up, because where does it end? It's like it becomes that TV series Lost. Where there's no point where you go, I can see now it's on the downhill slide. So the midpoint has got to be there. You've got to have some sort of point where you can start saying, things have turned. Usually they get more serious. Yeah. And you're no longer exploring the world. You're now trying to solve or survive the world. Yeah. And that comes down to these things like the bad guys closing in, which in many films is literally bad guys closing in, or Dark Night of the Soul, this whiff of death, which is like some opportunity has been cut off. It could be a literal death, or it could be a relationship is broken, or any number of other things. A dream has ended. You can no longer, that avenue is being cut off, which we should be left as the audience going, oh no, hang on, what's it going to do? How's this going to happen? Because we've seen enough foreshadowing and enough drive and plot and character built so far that we we know this isn't the end, but maybe we can't even see how it's going to develop to the ending.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this death which gives us this inspiration. The person gets a bit of insight. They go, damn it, I'm not going to let this set me back. Or I was like, I can't give up. My son is relying on me, or something along those lines. Usually something referencing an occurrence earlier in the film. And we move into Act 3. And what is Act 3?
Well, you've gone on that journey, Surrey.
I have.
As a character, Surrey has been disturbed by his catalyst. He's debated it. He's gone through a journey of, maybe this is what I should do about it. Maybe this isn't what I should do about it. Oh, I'm having some fun. Oh, I'm not having some fun. Oh, things are serious. Oh, crap, I didn't want to do this. Oh, no, this journey has gotten very tough. I don't know. Oh, someone's dead or my idea's dead. And then where do I go from here? And then, okay, actually, I'm going to try this idea.
Yeah, get a plan.
Yeah, get a plan. And that's really Act 3. So now I'm acting out this plan and I'm gathering resources and people and things and tools and all those sorts of things. And I'm going to fight, like in this film, I'm going to fight the weather.
Oh, yeah.
I take on the planet Mother Earth. You're going down. Here's my AK-47. And, that's the whole point is like, having a crack at what you thought was the answer to the catalyst. And lo and behold, most of the time in a really good feature narrative, that plan doesn't quite work.
No.
And maybe something is surprise hit you, or, the bad guy actually had an ace up the sleeve. The corporate identity actually does have a get out clause in your contract and you can no longer work for us. The underdogs don't show up and they forfeit their last game.
Yes.
And, the alien does invade and, the military is overtaken. So that quite often can happen. And then in that sort of disastrous moment, that character really needs to reflect on their whole journey and go, you know what? After all, it wasn't the weapon. It was inside me all along.
It was our friendship all along.
It was our friendship all along. And in fact, if we're going to die today, Surrey and I, we had a go at being space brains, and that's all that really mattered. It doesn't matter about.
We use that as a bit of a joke, and it is now become a bit of a cliche joke that the real treasure was friendship all along. But that's come about because that is the classic end of third act.
It is.
Twist, which is the twist that open up the chest. Its treasure chest is empty.
Yes.
But then the final victory is realizing it was all inside all along.
Yeah, and the friendship overcomes the alien invasion by just love. Aliens don't know what love is.
Tom Jones music.
Yeah, and so that actually wins the day and they overcame their major obstacle. So that is our 3-act structure. And then you might have like a bit of a happily ever after at the end to the story. So that kind of takes us in full circle. So let's narrow down some of those key points for the day the Earth caught fire. I loved how this started. You mentioned before it's like an orangey, tealy, overcasty kind of vibe, isn't it, at the start? And we get this real lone figure come out of the mist. I think we also have a police car on a very deserted London street telling us that the bomb is going to detonate or something in 10 minutes.
The detonation will be in 9 minutes.
Whatever it is.
17 minutes.
But we're basically showing this London that is deserted. It's a bit broken. There's cars overturned. There's rubbish kind of flying around. It's very bright and dry and orangey. And this lone figure comes creeping along. Now, that is first of all, I'm just going to say that's cool. Like London deserted, right? Like that's cool. And then also the special effects were done by good old matte painting, so painting the background. So painting a London street. So they used to do that on a lot of films.
Yeah, I know they had they used some forced perspective with models. So the overturned car was a model car. You could just tell that the shadows weren't quite big enough or soft, that the edges were too sharp.
Yeah, but for the era,
it looked good.
It looked good
if you weren't paying too much attention.
Yeah, and I mean then that's what when this lone figure comes closer to the camera, we sort of, you're following him. Who cares about the background? You're interested in what's this guy stumbling around. And he stumbles into the Daily Mail and he picks up the phone. And we see that the Daily Mail, which you'd imagine would be a hive of activity normally, no one's in there. And he picks up the phone, he kind of goes through and a young woman answers, and they do a little bit of banter straight away, actually. And this is because this is Jenny. And then he wants to tell his story. So he starts telling his story. And this is where we get the good old flash.
3 months earlier.
Scooby-Doo, the shots sort of melting into each other. And it's 3 months earlier.
And we're now just to a sort of a black and white. It's almost like the reverse of the... What was it? The Wizard of Oz, where it's all black and white, and it goes to Technicolor.
Yes.
Which was like, an absolute revolution.
Revolution in the time, yeah.
And I remember as a kid getting annoyed watching the black and white going, it's one of those old ones.
Yes.
Like, old, maybe it was like not too much older than I was.
My mum we used to watch, what's happening in my brain tonight? Phil Collins on a Saturday night here in Australia.
Oh, yes.
Playing the really old movies. And, sometimes they're the black and white. And straight away you're like, black and white.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, though, if you forget about that, many of them are very, very good. The ones that have survived through to be replayed now, they're actually really very good.
Yeah.
Such as this one. And it changes to black and white, which is a stark contrast to the orangey colour. It's clearly much better, and the office is just chockers with people.
Yeah.
And there's people just talking constantly. There's just answering phones, yammering back and forward. This is our opening image, isn't it? It's, the opening image has... It's him walking down the street, and we get introduced to a couple of the characters. And then we have... Was this the catalyst where we change over to...
No.
Not yet.
This is the setup, because this is like the Daily Mail and the busyness and then we learn about him. So we're learning that very quickly. We're learning that he's like a bit of a dejected journalist. He's not the top journalist. He used
to be at the top of his game.
There used to be. His colleague is heavily invested, and he kind of jokes, you got to sober up enough to tell a story, and where were you last night, and did you ever leave the pub, and there's a lot of sort of impressions that he used to be a good journalist, and now it's just kind of like he's living day by day, not really caring.
He's checked out.
Yeah. And in fact, there's a great line he says in this opening bit. He says, alcoholics of the press, unite. Which is part of this quip, this wit that he does have, which I think is his version of Save the Cat, right? Like he's a depressed alcoholic who's given up, but he's kind of funny.
He's kind of funny, and he's he has this relationship with his fellow writer and this writer seems to be the science writer who's heavily leaned upon by the rest of the newspaper to get sort of facts and understanding, which is important because then he acts as our view into the story later on. Yeah,
and his friend Bill Maguire, the veteran, does seem to be, even though he's kind of a bit of a bitter old journalist, or like maybe bitter's too strong a word, he is really full of encouragement he's trying to get him back.
He's carrying him, really. Like, he really writes his report.
Yeah, so to me this is all, and it's heavily rainy, and they kind of joke about how heavily it's raining, but I think most of us would stereotype London as a heavy rain.
Well, I felt a little bit of connection there with last year. We had here in Mandurah, we joke about how there's never rains here, but we had the wettest July and August on record. And my wife and I, we noted that it was pissing down, if you don't mind me saying so, the whole month, month and a half, it was just pouring non-stop. Like it was just, and it was heavy.
Was that 2021 or 2022?
Yeah, last year. What's the year now? 22?
22.
It's 21, yes. Yes, last winter, it was just the heaviest rain. We were stuck inside. The spring school holidays were just home-ridden because it was just pouring rain the whole time. And when they were joking about the rain here, I'm thinking, oh my God, it must be really, really rainy there for them to notice it.
So to me, the catalyst happens next, basically, is the discovery that the weather's a bit off, and then them actually saying that the Soviet Union and the United States similarly detonated these nuclear bombs.
Yeah, we get that
So
news in saying the Russians have detonated a bomb.
Yeah.
We heard about the American one,
Yeah.
and that was kind of by and by. And then the Russian one came in, and is it Bill Maguire sort of says, "Oh, when did they do that?" Oh, it was this, yesterday afternoon. It says, well, where did they do it? Siberia. What's the time difference between Siberia and Antarctica? Where the Americans, and it was like, that was where I was going, this is the bit, because you know that the world's going to be catching on fire.
Yeah.
But you don't know why or how or whatever. That was indeed the part. While watching this, I went, oh, okay, they're going to say that nuclear bombs are doing this.
Yes.
Still didn't know what this was, whether it was just a reaction, chain reaction in the atmosphere or what.
Yeah, so they didn't, that was the thing. So the catalyst to me is just them discovering that the bombs went off at pretty simultaneous times, but not, at that point, they're not actually like, oh, that causes the weather. They're just that recognition of those two to me, because it's like, if that didn't happen, the world doesn't change, does it?
Doesn't catch fire. well, we've got no, like, if things progressed and the world kept getting worse, but we had none of that reasoning for it, it would just be a list of events occurring. It's a story, no plot.
Yes.
Like we go, okay, so what? It's raining here. Oh, now it's hot. Why? Like, none of that makes any sense.
And I guess actually it's interesting you're saying that, because that's kind of Stenning's grief, because he's sent off to the bureau to begin with because it's raining so much. And to him, he's like, oh, this is a crap story.
Yeah, because Bill Maguire is the science editor and says, well, how about, Peter, how about you get a hold of Sir What's-His-Face, the head of the meteorology.
Oh, good old
And
Sir
he goes, okay,
What's-His-Face.
so he calls up the meteorology and gets Jeannie, who's temping on the desk. So she's not normally a phone operator, and he gets a bit grumpy and short with her, and she says that she's normally from the pool, so he says, well, why don't you go back there and drown in it? Which is kind of funny. It's a bit rude in that, it's like, go kill yourself.
Yeah.
But more like it's the typing pool.
Yeah.
And go drown and go become one of the faceless minions. Like, that's what the impression I got, was it was this double thing of drown it, but also just return to the anonymous pool that I don't have to talk to. You're just one of the bunch, which is quite dismissive.
Yes.
And that's why he I think a little spark of his old self. He's got to still get that story, because he could have just gone, I couldn't get through.
Yeah.
But no, he's got, fine. You don't think I can do this? I am going to get in contact. And so he does. He runs off, and that's kind of the getting in towards the debate. It's like he's going, I'm going to go down and talk to the head down there, but he gets rebuffed a bit as he goes in. He has to sort of trick his way in. He walks in and says, I'm going to the press office. That's on the same floor as Sir Watson's features, isn't it? And the security goes, oh, no. Sir Watson's features is the floor up. The press office is not that important. Press office is only level 2. Oh, radio, yes, of course, level 2. And so he goes up to level 3, of course, which is quite clever.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what we're seeing there is just that he's a good journalist. Even if
he is a go-getter.
He's a go-getter. He knows his way. He knows how to sort of scam the system a bit. And, anyway, this is where he does meet. He's trying to get this temperature data. And I suppose on one side, this is where he's getting lots of rejections. He's not... the government is not just handing over this information. And this is a theme for the whole film, is that we're not... And you and I, and we talked about this with a few people after the film, it was interesting, this disaster film is not the normal one that we see now, where we're in the White House. We're privy to the science, the key scientists from
the hero is
Windsor Castle, and they're telling us all the data and showing us some sort of graphic. This film is I liked that this film was more from the masses, and so Stenning is the masses. He's representative of the masses by being just a regular journalist. And so here he uses his best wits, actually better than probably you and I would be able to achieve, but because he speaks to one guy and that guy shuns him out, and then he tries to come into the office a different way, and then he starts speaking to the receptionist, and then even when all that doesn't work, he still goes to the press gallery.
But he goes down there and asking for the, tonight's bulletin.
Yeah.
He says, oh, yes, I've just been asked to check that the tonight's bulletin's gone out okay.
Yeah.
Which clearly he's trying to get a look at maybe some information that hasn't been public yet.
Yeah, that's right. So he's trying every trick he's got to get, and he's succeeding to a point. And but there's this straight away we're introduced to. It's not just like, oh, hey, Stenning, old boy, yeah, sure, come on in, I'll show you the latest government data.
Of course.
Of course, for Stenning, anything. No, it's like, no, get out of here. You're not allowed in this office. And I did like that. I liked that this film does not just show us everything.
No.
And we're not privy to everything.
Well, it was also interesting that his reputation had preceded him. The fellow he first spoke to knew of him, and knew that he used to be a good journalist, and now who's a little bit less so.
Yeah.
And,
why would I talk to you, Stenning?
Yes, I don't want to talk to you, and what's this? And even if this was in the past, because Stenning sort of raises, we used to be good friends, we used to have good contacts. He says, well, even if this was that still time, I still can't tell you.
Yeah.
And boots him out, and that's where he ends up with bumping into Jeannie again, because she's back down dealing with the pool sort of stuff, the diving pool, and he asks for the evening release, to hoping to get a look at it. She remembers him and is a bit short with him.
And I saw this online. They described it as, this is where they meet cute in apostrophes, and I'm like, meet cute. Wow,
Okay.
like that's a 1960s, 70s. It's like basically flirting, but the way they flirted in this film is called meet cute.
They're meeting cute, but they
Yeah. If you're out there and you've met cute someone, it's hard.
After I
I'd love
cuted my wife,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
I dragged her off on the floor until she recovered.
Yeah, that's it. Tasty. So they set up this banter, of course, because he was rude on the phone. She's not impressed. She kind of squashes him back
And
down.
he's trying to backpedal a bit.
Yeah, and now he's met her in person. He doesn't mind how she looks.
My, she's a fine looking bird.
That's right.
I don't know why I'm doing like, what is this, James Cagney?
Yeah.
See, she's a fine bird. Yeah.
And anyway, he this is where again he does disappear, but overnight, and Maguire writes his story. So
that's because he's caught it in the rain.
yes, he gets caught in the rain. But it's only rain. Sorry, why didn't he come to work another day?
Well,
We're going to annoy our audience if we talk like that the whole way through.
you're saying it's only rain.
Yeah. So he got rained out, but it's implied that maybe he got rained out at the pub, I think.
Yes, he got rained out at the pub.
Yeah.
Well, he couldn't go home. He had to stay at the pub, couldn't he?
So the weather, there's a change here, but the weather changes from pretty rapidly from raining heavily to then heat.
Heat, yes.
And suddenly there's a montage basically very quickly that it's hot. And in that, to me, that is the break into two. So there's like a drastic change suddenly in the story.
Yes, and we also get him. He's changed too, because he's visiting the pier with his son, as I understand it, and suddenly you sort of see that he's sober and he's not. He's
He's
nice.
a bit of a different guy. Yeah.
He's a dad who really just wants to sort of spend time with his son. Yeah, well, that's only because he doesn't live full time with. Oh no, but he wants to meet full time with play with his son, and the nanny's kind of a bit. I'm not sure,
short.
What's going on there, but I
think the nanny's like, it's that typical thing that you know as a parent where it's like, yeah, sure, take him on the ghost train. And she even says, she goes, yeah, but now he's going to have nightmares and you're not there for the nightmare bit. You're just there for the fun bit, So
yeah.
It's kind of like when the grandparents take them out and see a horror movie or something. You're like, well, that was fun for them then, but at night I'm going to be dealing with it, aren't I?
But we're sort of getting now some of the promise of the premise is this relationship between Peter and Jeannie.
Yeah.
Because he bumps into her. She's sunbaking.
You sunbathing. Don't mind the look of that, as he says.
And he comes over and joins her and has a bit of a...
Of course he joins in.
They meet cute a bit.
Yeah, they do. They keep meeting cuting.
They cute meeting. And... No, I don't
quite get it.
I'm not sure I work that phrase into future sentences with people. I think meet cute. I don't mean to meet cute, but darling, you're cute. Oh.
Yeah. No, so this is where language changes over time, isn't it?
It also
Shows
goes to
you.
show how much more eloquent Peter Stenning is than myself. So they kind of progress a bit of a B story.
Yeah, they do. It gets more and more serious.
And this is where the fog rolls, and they go rushing up to have a look at the. Oh, okay. So I'm jumping ahead, am I?
A little bit. I think the city swelters. We get more of the government not answering.
Oh yeah.
The newspaper publishes and writes the stories. So they've been and then that's where you're up to. They're right there.
Yeah. So
that's Stenning. Yeah, they're chatting it up. They banter. And they go. Yeah, the fog rolls in.
The fog rolls in, which of course means that Stenning can't get back to the paper again.
Yeah, again.
But this time he manages to get back to Jeannie's house.
Yes.
Which is where humorously he does call the paper from her phone.
Yeah.
And tells them that he's at Club Jeannie because they're expecting him to be at a pub or a club or something, And Jeannie doesn't realise that until she gets called a little later on and asked, if it's Club Jeannie, and she's like, "What?" Yeah, so this is that scene that I liked where they're sort of
it's a great band
doing their little flirtation. He's sort of trying it on a bit, and she's still like, "Yeah, no, I really don't know you that well."
Yeah.
But she's a nice woman. She's letting him sleep in the bathroom on the floor, and he suggests maybe he just sleep in the tub.
Yeah.
That way, because he's all washed up.
Yeah.
And then... Yeah.
And she does, she says, well, I think he says, what would be one reason that you would kind of be with me? And she's like, well, first of all, the drinking, and so he puts the drink down.
Yeah,
so
he quite significantly, because he has his whiskey bottle out and then he puts it down and he goes, oh, okay, well...
I think he was hoping that would be enough, but for her to... invite him into the bed.
Yeah, and then she's still like,
shuts the bathroom door and he's a bit like, oh, damn.
Yeah, that's a good start, but, But it is nice. It's a nice little sort of character development for him.
It's
there.
a great character development.
He's intrigued by this woman who is as quick-witted as he is and not willing to simply let him charm her.
Yeah, and I mean, it's clever writing here, right? Because the weather has gotten severely worse. That he can't even walk back to work, or he can't get back to work. We're seeing the trains don't work, the buses aren't working, cars are kind of like, crashing into each other.
No, the airport is having to divert traffic.
Yeah, the airport's kind of closing down. So, and the fact that he can't walk back to work, I mean, it's implying how severe it is. So, this is where the newspaper discovers that, or Stenning discovers that. How does he discover this? I'm trying to remember. He discovers that the weapons tests have had a massive effect on the Earth.
Yeah, well, he's talking with Maguire.
That's right,
and they're sort of saying, what could cause such a thing? Because they're finding out that there's New York is in blizzard, and there's this heavy rain.
That's where we get the West Australian reference.
Do this stripe across the globe, down across West Australia is included.
That's it.
And they're going, well, what could this be? And all the rest of it. And says, well, it's almost as if the Earth has, changed its axis.
Yeah.
Seasons have changed. It's nutation, as they say, altered by 11 degrees. But no, that couldn't possibly be true. Mm. And they at some point they do get confirmation that in fact, yes, it is true. So that's the tilt of the Earth that normally gives rise to the seasons. So I wasn't clear if it was increased by 11 degrees or decreased by 11 degrees. So normally it's at about 22 degrees. Yeah. So the sun here at the height of summer, the sun is 22 degrees further overhead, further south.
Yeah.
Or should I say, at the deep of winter, it is 22 degrees further north than it is in summer.
Yeah.
So that's why we have our eaves at a certain level, so that in summer, that change in angle of the sun lets in or stops the sun. So if it's another 11 degrees over, it's going to completely screw up their seasons.
Totally.
Yeah, I think they were trying to indicate it's increased by 11 degrees because I'm thinking that would mean daylight would be a lot like you'd have almost constant nighttime in the winter parts, the winter hemisphere, and almost constant daytime further south, like the Arctic pole, what they call it, the Arctic circles would have shifted and the equator would have shifted.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Maguire does mention something about he's a whole new equator, something like that, So, and when you really do think about it, you're like, yeah, how would that work? Because, yeah, which way have we shifted, and the whole thing would rebalance.
I think I'd have to grab myself a globe.
Yeah, but then would it actually? Because I mean, I've heard scientists talk about even with the tide, the way the tide works isn't us just turning; it's that the water is. What's the word? It's like because of the gravitational pull of the whole Earth, the water actually is there. So it's actually, it's almost like we move into the water and out of the water, which is a totally different way to imagine. Like you think, oh no, we're turning and the moon's turning and it's kind of actually like there's a blob of water.
Yeah.
Which is really weird. Like I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. And the water at the equator is spinning faster than the water at the poles. So that's why you get hurricanes and cyclones.
Yeah.
You get that, one goes clockwise, one anti-clockwise.
Yeah. I know.
And so if you then shift that 11 degrees across further, the water doesn't instantly shift with it. Like it's still 11 degrees off. So and indeed the Thames goes dry at some point here, which you're sort of thinking would have to mean that the ocean would have to have receded somewhat. But there you go. And I
which
guess
actually,
it probably
with that blob analogy of water would be true. Yeah, that would be true because you would almost like the Earth would shift so that something like a river, like the ocean, could go out one way. Yeah,
it would. Yeah. So
I think accurately they've done the movie. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, they probably did it fairly accurately.
So the newspaper discovered this, and they've had their brainstorming, and so they said about there's that great scene. The editor kind of sets them all into action, doesn't he? Remember, like, go get the helicopter, go up, get shots. You're going over there, and you're getting the story. I'm getting this chief.
Call around to all the
minister, get him on the phone. I don't care where he is, and tell them that we're going to print this newspaper article with or without them. Like he really actions them, doesn't he?
Yeah, and we had this massive storm output.
Yep.
And we get then solar eclipse happens ahead of schedule.
Yeah, this to me is the midpoint.
Yeah, and again, it's using a visual clue.
Yeah.
Cue, which is the eclipse because it's very obvious change in tone where. And eclipses are traditionally a sign of ill omen.
Mm-hmm.
They
are.
They
are a bit scary, aren't they?
Yeah, I've never seen one. I expect they must be somewhat scary.
Well, in a movie, they seem to always be scary.
Yeah, there's supposed to be one happening here in
soon.
WA
next year.
Next year, pretty soon. So maybe we should probably try and go along to that and see what it's like.
Yeah, up north, there is going to be a really pivotal, fantastic spot for the whole planet to go to.
Yeah, well, there we go.
Western Australia and remote WA.
We'll go up there and report live by podcast, which is pointless because it's a recorded media and you can't see anything.
Well, we might be filming us at that stage.
We could film, I suppose.
And the cinematographer captured an eclipse.
Oh, it's a real eclipse.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, just as a little finger note, I'm not sure how they did that in the timing of the movie, but apparently.
But this is the time where the heat starts building up because we start running out of water, and this likewise I think was a rather British concept. Is that they're rationing the water, so they've got public shower stalls where you have a rationed amount of showering, which to me I would have thought you'd be better off when you just hanging out wet wipes. Here's your wet towel.
Did they have a lot of wet wipes back in that era? But
I don't know. They had towels.
Had towels.
So
I
wash
a towel.
Yeah, here's a wet towel.
But
wipe yourself down.
But then you got to clean the towel, don't you?
Yeah, but you can do that more efficiently than you can a whole bunch of humans.
Especially if it's so dry, it would disinfect itself in the sun.
But I found it funny that there was this priority on making sure they set up public wash areas, showers.
Very.
And I was like, what about drinking water? Like, isn't that I would have thought that would be where everyone's lining up for, is the drinking water, not the showering. It seems very important.
Because, I mean, like, we're in one of the biggest droughts ever, Surrey, in Australia, and have been for many years, and yet we still allow people to just, like, put water on their gardens.
I find it funny that we even bother talking about droughts in Australia anymore.
Yeah.
Ever since a kid, as far as I can remember, we've been
in a drought.
In a drought to some extent.
So
somewhere.
when they actually say drought, it's severe.
Oh yeah, it's a real drought.
But we are an economic powerhouse that can afford to pump water out of the ocean and turn it into drinking water, into water onto your garden. Like
all those lawns.
Oh my goodness!
So people are slowly removing lawns.
Yes, I know we're getting there. We're getting there. I removed mine a couple of years.
There's a lot of people have gone the artificial
Yeah.
turf, and then other people going native gardens, succulent gardens.
Yes.
In my old house that was sold, I had all succulent, and
we all should be moving to that natural garden. But anyway, that's another topic for a different podcast. To me, this is kind of like really symbolic of the bad guys moving in, but is what you were just saying, like public baths, no more water in anti-coming year taps.
I think maybe it's bringing back that World War II fear, because
it is. The
you got to
government.
think 61, all of these characters who would have been, let's call them 30 for lack of a better age. Some of them were obviously a bit older, but if World War II was only 20 years prior, they would all have been growing up through their formative years.
Yeah.
They would have remembered Blitz.
yeah.
And even after World War II finished, it's not like suddenly all the utilities were back on and all the buildings were rebuilt.
Nope.
It still would have been a couple of years after that, there still would have been damage and problems. So the characters themselves would have seen the water rationing and gone, I
back to
recognise
this
this. We're doing this again.
And I mean, we didn't have it with the pandemic in terms of this, but we did have some of this kind of level of government control in terms of testing for the virus, and in terms of rations and panic in the street over these scenarios. So,
Well, I do remember in the first lockdown in 2020, and towards the end of March there, going into the shops and you're seing empty shelves. And I was really starting thinking to myself, at what stage do I get concerned? At what point am I going to have to start altering my food consumption and usage behaviour? Because at the moment I'm able to sort of substitute with other sort of stuff I don't normally, other brands and things.
And I had the same thought, and it was even like one thing for the supermarket shelves to kind of be emptying out, and the government talking about rations and stuff. But then you kind of go, does it go to this? What this film does, which is suddenly the guys at a war work at the Water Corp can't work, and you can't get water in your tap.
Yes.
What about them? What about if every house can't get fresh water? How would people react? Does the government hand out water rations?
Yeah.
And then does your neighbour break into your house to get the water out of your toilet or whatever, right?
Or steal your toilet paper.
Yeah, steal your toilet paper, whatever, right? So it's and then once people don't have access to water and they're more desperate, what are they going to behave like, And so that's what a film like this is always walking down that path, isn't it? So it definitely is, to me, the bad guys closing in, that the government rescues that, hands out that, and they declare a state of emergency.
But then we get that next, turn of the screw, because it's, okay, so, we're tilted 11 degrees, seasons have changed, and they've sort of indicated that there's going to be a new normal. And we've heard that phrase, and we don't like it. Nobody likes new normals, regardless of whether new good normals or new bad normals. No one likes it. But that's not enough, because that's only the bad guys moving in. We need death of hope. There was kind of this thought that, seasons have changed. Where it used to rain a lot, now it doesn't. Other places where it never rained, it does. That can all average itself out. We can get through this. Pull together, come along, fellas. We pulled together during the Blitz. We can do it now too.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's when we get that extra little blow of, it's getting worse. And why is it getting worse? The heat and the cooking. It's because the Earth has not just been tilted 11 degrees, it's also been knocked a little bit off orbit.
Yes.
And it's going to crash into the sun. I assume not immediately.
No.
But that's not really the problem. The problem was that within 3 months or whatever it is, Earth would be uninhabitable because it'll have moved out of its pleasant spot and into the danger spot.
No. We wouldn't survive all the way until it hits the sun.
No. We'd be long dead before then. And so that, I think, that is that moment of all is lost. What's going to happen? There's this. We had this hope, and now that's been dashed.
Yes.
And so we're moving into, that the very end of Act 2.
Yep. I will say that part of that, things getting more bleak as well, is that then we have a scene where Jennings trying to get to Jeannie, and the youth have overtaken. They're rioting. They're going,
and
why?
they're splashing water on each other.
Which is great. They're like, they're going, stuff you. We're going to splash water on each other, and they're kind of being jovial, and they're smashing cars. And then we find that they've broken into Jenny's place and again stealing the water rations. And this is that thing. Like once you start rationing humans, or you push humans into a corner like rats in a cage, some are going to react and go, no, it's not about the greater good, it's about me,
Yeah.
And this is what's happening. He finds them in Jenny's apartment, and they're just kind of like rebellious teenagers. They're not super violent or anything, but they're being silly and breaking down. They're teasing her in the bath, and I mean it isn't great. She's in the bath, but then he pulls them over, and they don't again have a proper fight or anything still. But he pushes them out. And he pushes one who falls down the elevator.
Yeah, I know.
And the others kind of scream and yell, and it's like, well, oh yeah, this is not just fun and games. This is really serious. This can lead to. This is not leading down a good path.
Because this is one of those oldie elevators where you had to, you could just have like an open elevator shaft.
And I think it's somewhere around here. The editor also says to him, "You've got a son, don't you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "I'd get out of the city if I could." So this is what I mean. Like, there's kind of as we're heading towards that third act, it's becoming quite obvious that it's
and that
a bit
again is a
bleak.
callback to the Blitzkrieg, where they're setting the kids out of the city.
Yes,
and he does. He rushes down to the. He goes down there and he manages to say goodbye to his son, which is nice.
Yes, he does.
And he sort of because he's recovered and because Jeannie's basically given him Jeannie and this story have given him the reason to recover himself.
Yeah.
Like, so in one side, the story, cracking the story, has brought his professionalism back.
Yep.
And meeting Jeannie, who's kind of like an equal challenge to him, has restored his social ability,
Which definitely, those things are taking him into that third act.
And so when he does meet his ex-wife, clearly she's going, what am I going to get? What sort of serve am I going to get from this drunk lunatic?
Yeah.
And instead, he's very sort of, okay, look, just look after my son. And even the other man in the picture, his son's stepdad, he sort of says, look, thanks. I'm glad, because he's rich. He's like, I'm glad you can take him out. Just look after him, okay?
Yeah.
And that's like you can see that's a big moment for him. That's kind of like, it's also a bit of a death.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of, okay, you have accepted that you are no longer that part of that family.
Yeah.
He's still your son. You're going to see him, whatever, but you're not the father. You're the other dad, as it were. But you're not raising him anymore. And it was kind of a bit heartbreaking to sort of see, but it was a nice character development moment there where he held himself together and was respectable. Which is nice.
And that was, I suppose, very unlike that kind of humor, joke, bantering, everything's funny sort of guy at the start of the film. So in this sort of Act 3, we get told that the scientists have a plan, which is to detonate all the nuclear bombs
Blow
they have.
more bombs up.
Blow more bombs, which is probably very logistically accurate.
Well, I mean, look, if blowing the bombs up knocked it one way,
you'd think, well, why don't we do it the other way?
You got the only option there really is to blow it the other way.
Yep. Stenning, Maguire and Jenny then gather at a bar to basically see the end of the world out.
Yeah, have a one last drink.
One last drink. The bombs are detonated, and the shockwave causes dust.
Yeah, a bit of dust, but nothing much, because the countdown happens, and everyone's sitting there, and there's a little bit of dust in the air, and you go, okay.
Okay. And then we kind of pan into the newspaper room, and we see one version of a front page, which is "The world is saved."
I really like this because there's this kind of time shift, because we're back to the start of the film in time period, and he does his little story, and we go into the newsroom, and you're not sure if there's been another time shift, and it shows, world saved, plan works beautifully.
Yeah.
And I, as an audience member, I sort of went, oh, are they saying it all? Oh, they got confirmation.
Yeah, it must have.
And then it scanned across, and there's all these printers looking shady,
waiting for the
and
go
it
ahead.
Scans across to the next page.
Yeah.
World doomed, plan failed, and you realise no, they've actually just prepared the front pages of each of them. And the other nice thing, like the newspaper's still continuing on. Like even if the world is doomed, they didn't bother just going, let's just print the good one.
Yeah.
No, like we're newsmen. We have got to report because it doesn't kind of really matter. It's like, I don't know how many people are going to be buying your newspaper or how many advertisers are going to pay to be in the classifieds of that paper.
I think I still go. Get your end of the world gas mask, disaster kit and whatever.
Yeah. Shaving kit. Don't forget to shave. Look good for Armageddon.
And then so that final image after that is the film ends without revealing which one will be published. And we have a voiceover from Stenning which says, Will humanity recover after all this horror?
Yeah.
And so, it is that open ending that we talked about earlier, that it doesn't have the classical Hollywood ending.
And again, we're left in the dark. So we're revealed what the plan is to fix things, but we haven't been told by the powers that be if it's worked or not. Yeah. And I guess you wouldn't know for a while.
Yeah. I loved this type of ending for this film. I felt very satisfied. And I also liked, and we didn't sort of touch on it, I liked how some of the montages of the film and the time sort of moving in the film, Val, the director, used that ability of, there was one that was clocks, so we went from one clock in one scene to another clock in another, so it was a seamless transition. There was also the use of wheels on
spinning
wheels as, again, time moving on, the world moves on. And the newspapers, there's that great scene earlier where they do kind of see bits of the world, and it's done through, again, newspapers, sort of the disasters around the world.
It was a clever mixing of stock footage with generated footage.
Yes, I loved that. I love that sort of editing transition that he decided to use as well. So anyway, go check it out. It's a really great film. Neither of us had seen it, so we couldn't technically probably say it was a classic, but I think it is quite a good classic.
Yeah, I mean, it's
sci-fi film.
It's really well put together. Like you're looking at it, and again, forget about the fact that it's 1960s and there's a couple sort of oddities in the social setting and so forth. Yeah. But it's a very slick production.
Yeah,
the cutting, the camera movement. It almost feels a bit modern in the way it does a lot of that stuff, which makes me wonder how much this film influenced future films.
Oh, massively, I reckon.
If I go and dig through and I find out it's true, then we might be able to retrospectively classicalize this a little bit.
Anyway, if you just put it on our regular ladder, Surrey, which we like to put some films together for a viewing experience, I myself would put this in with, I think, as a little trilogy of watching, would be the Australian sci-fi Cargo, which is, again, apocalyptic, end of the world kind of stuff, where the father and the baby tramp across the countryside.
Cooper Petey, mostly.
Yeah. Chuck this one in the middle, The Day the Earth Caught Fire, and then the great Chinese sci-fi, The Wandering Earth.
I immediately thought of The Wandering Earth too, which is a similar theme, really, isn't it? Like shifting,
it is
shifting the Earth on purpose.
Yeah, definitely.
Or not on purpose.
Yeah. So I think that trilogy would be a very interesting sort of end of the world watching.
Look, I did cheat on this and thought I would actually think I'd like to watch this with Soylent Green and Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, okay. Yep.
In date order, because it's an interesting study there of the social environment that informed the film.
Yeah,
so
you want to look at the
in 56, it's the early part of the Cold War. They're still worried about, Russians or communists infiltrating society and kind of, this domino effect they're worried about where these states would fall to communism, which I don't know, like communism's pretty sucky, really, as has been shown. But they're worried about it. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it was a bit of a reaction to that feeling at the time. And then 61, the nuclear testing through the late 50s and obviously into the 60s there fueled this fear. Well, how many bombs are we going to blow up? If they keep blowing up bigger and bigger bombs, what's going to happen?
What happens,
Yeah. And then 73, we've gotten past the majority of the bomb worries. And we're now into just food shortages, and because at the time in the 70s we started getting oil shortage. The price of petrol was going way up. These cars were underpowered at the time, so we came out of the 50s and 60s, and muscle cars were getting bigger, stronger, more powerful engines, burning more petrol to do ridiculous power to weight ratios for the time.
You suddenly have
you come into the 70s
shortage.
and suddenly there's like petrol prices spiked, and people are going, have we dug all the oil out? Are we going to run out of oil? And then there's also global warming fears. Even back then they're going, well, how far can we go with this industrialization?
Yep.
And
that'd be interesting.
so it's an interesting sort of triple play there.
So there you go. You got one of us looking at it a bit from the style of the films, and one of us looking at it from the themes, or where the era of the film was born in, which would be very good viewing experiences. But let us know what you're viewing films like, and what you think this film would sort of match up, maybe with a partner or with a trilogy of films. So, sorry, are we talking about burning?
We're talking about what?
The world is burning. And
we're talking about nuclear weapons, and what would it take to move the Earth?
Oh, okay.
Because the premise of this film is that they blew up 2 bombs and tilted the Earth.
Yep. And the wandering Earth does move the Earth.
Yeah, so the obvious question is, what are we going to need? What would it take? What sort of energy are we talking about? How heavy is the Earth anyway?
Heavy.
Quite as the obvious answer is heavy. The obvious answer also about how many bombs it would take would be a lot, but let's get a little bit more specific about it, because people have asked this question.
Yeah.
There's been just the general sort of science fiction question asked, but then there's also the question asked about global warming, which I'll get to, in a curious way of solving global warming,
right?
Which we'll get to.
Move the Earth.
So the first, the first thing we're talking about is, the question was asked, in order to shift the Earth's orbit or change the spin of the Earth or tilt its axis, what would we need to do? And Konstantin Batygin, he's a planetary astrophysicist at Caltech. So he's sort of, these sort of numbers and ideas is something he talks about. And he says, there's an interesting point here that you could also, with a similar sort of energy, you could actually slow the Earth down enough that you could blow it up. Wow. It was kind of interesting. So Earth has kinetic energy, which is how embodied by how fast it's spinning. There's all this mass of Earth that's spinning. And if you ever had a playground area with a little merry-go-round thing the kids go spinning on, and your kid goes, "Oh, I'm getting sick, get me off," and you go, "Well, I'll just stop it." And it's quite hard to stop, isn't it? Because there's weight of this thing spinning. The faster it spins, the harder it is to stop. Needless to say, the Earth weighs about 6 times 10 to the 23 kilograms. Yeah, or 22 kilograms, or 6 times 10 to the 16 tons, which is, so it's a 6 with like 16 zeros after it. Yeah. A billion has 9 zeros, so we're talking about a billion and then like another 7 zeros. So what's that? 100 million billion tons.
Sounds like an Austin Powers.
600 million billion tons is how, roughly speaking, how heavy the Earth is. So you work that by going, it's half the mass of the Earth times its orbital velocity squared. So this guy Konstantin, he talks in ergs. I had to look that up because that's not a standard unit of measure. That's from an older centimetre. Like, we have centimetres, certainly in Australia. Centimetres aren't part of the standard units. Millimetres and metres, kilometres, that's standard units. Centimetres is kind of one of these, like, I don't know, extra little bit chucked in there just to make things a bit convenient. Right. Erg comes from that same level of measurement. Okay. And it doesn't really matter if he uses ergs or whatever. It's just a rating of magnitude we're talking here. So the Earth's energy is about 10 to the 40 ergs. As you can imagine, that's a 1 with 40 zeros. It's a lot of ergs for all of the ergs are. And so the yield from what was called the Starfish Prime bomb test, which is a 1 megaton. So that's, I believe, the Hiroshima bomb, what people like to think of as being very devastating, was about 12 kilotons. So this is like 100 times the size of that.
Right.
It's a big bomb. So that's 10 to the 22 ergs. So you can see there's a power of 18 orders of magnitude difference, which you think, oh, that's not too big. That's pretty close, isn't it? But that's 18 zeros, so that's a billion. So in fact, he's saying here you're going to need 600 billion or 6 billion nuclear bombs of that size.
Wow.
Which...
That would be a lot.
That's a number so big that you kind of... I think this... I worked out if you created nuclear bombs at the typical rate that we create nuclear bombs, the sun would expand and engulf the Earth before we finished building enough bombs to tilt the... change the... However, the gravitational binding energy of the Earth, which is the energy to counteract the gravity holding the Earth together. So the Earth wants to suck the crust and everything down to the center, but at the same time it's spinning really fast. And so it wants to throw all of its mass off, as like the kids on the merry-go-round.
Wants to vomit.
If the center of the merry-go-round's heavy enough, like you got a magnet there and the kids have got belts on, the metal magnets on it, it would suck them in. But if you spun it fast enough, the kids would fly off. That you'd overcome that power. But anyway, so the gravitational binding energy of the Earth is 10 to the 39 ergs. So if you tried this experiment and amassed the necessary amount of weapons, you would actually have 10 times the energy needed to explode the Earth. You'd have 10 times the energy required to break the gravitational force and have the crust of the Earth fly off into space. That's interesting. So it would actually be easier to blow the Earth up than it would be to alter its spin. Yes. And likewise, we've got Luke Dons, who's a senior research scientist of planetary science and space at Southwest Research Institute. He had a very similar answer. He answered, though, in joules. Joules are, I can give you a better thing. So 1 joule is if you take a tennis ball and just sort of toss it relatively gently to someone, and when you catch it and you feel it hit your hand, that's 1 joule of energy you've just had hit you on the hand.
Right.
About a gentle tennis ball throw. So if you multiply that by 10 to the power of 33, you would have the Earth's energy.
All right. Wow.
So again, we're talking, hundreds of billions of tennis balls.
Yeah.
Which would you rather be hit by? 1 Earth-sized tennis ball or 100 billion tennis ball-sized Earths? Yeah. Which I don't know. So, and then he worked out a similar thing, being that you're going to need a billion of these big bombs. Interesting answer came from a volcanologist who said, if the largest and most explosive volcanic eruptions on Earth didn't send us towards the sun, then I'm pretty doubtful that a bomb could. I've seen estimates of eruptions being the energy equivalent of hundreds to thousands of times the energy of the bomb that devastated Hiroshima. And that is not taking into account the largest eruptions from volcanoes like Yellowstone or Taupo. So things like Krakatoa, and even just Mount St. Helens and things, it just themselves were natural explosions much larger. But this brings me back to this interesting question about solving global warming. And in June 11, 2021, so just last year, it was during a congressional hearing, a Republican representative, Louis Gohmert of Texas, asked a U.S. Forest Service official if her organization, or the Bureau of Land Management, could change the orbit of the moon or Earth to reverse the effects of human-caused climate change. And it sounds like a dumb idea, but you sort of think about it, you go, well, actually, what does it take? Because we've got one way of doing it, which would be to reduce our carbon dioxide production and remove it from the atmosphere in some fashion. But if we're saying that's going to take too long, could we just shift the Earth a little bit further away from the sun so we get a little bit less sunlight to equal it out until we get rid of the carbon dioxide, and then we could just shift the Earth back? Right? I don't know. Maybe that doesn't take much. Maybe it's achievable. So this scientist, Scharrenhauser, says, okay, let's have a look. So a 3 degrees centigrade decrease in temperature to counteract the current and near future anthropogenic warming would require us to move our planet an additional 3 million kilometers from the sun. So already, I think you and I are thinking, and I said that it was like 600 million billion tons of Earth, and we've got to shift it 3 million kilometers. It's not like we've got to shift it 2 inches. Yeah. And you go, oh, shit, okay. That maybe, you know, like that would be a rather cataclysmic explosion that would do that, but possibly. Okay, so some back of the envelope calculations going. We're talking about how heavy the Earth is. It's great big. We need to have a look at, or maybe the global electricity production. How much electricity do we generate? 10 to the 19 joules each year. So 10 to the 19 compared to the 10 to the 31 we need. It sort of sounds a bit close, but that's only 0.0000000000002% of the energy we'd require. And that's assuming we could convert it 100% efficiently into movement, which we can't. It'd be more like about 20%. So yeah, that's like that. So if we took all of the Earth's current electricity generation and somehow like the wandering Earth were to fire it through big thruster, it would 10 to the 13 years probably before we got any shift, and the sun would have exploded. You know, we don't have to worry about it. Global warming's the least of our worries at that point. But so anyway, there's another option, and this is an option that's been put forward, for example, for asteroid mining. So the idea is that what if we could get there's some big asteroids like kilometers across out floating around, and they're mostly iron, and they embody enough mineral wealth to basically surpass the Earth's total value of all mineral production for its history. So if we could get one of those nearby, we could mine it and build stuff. That'd be great. And it would be cheap. You know, you could actually just carve off bits and shoot it down to Earth, to unoccupied areas. So one idea there is to basically fly a nuclear bomb out, and you set the bomb off nearby, not on it, because what you're trying to do is vaporize some of the rock, and that ejects out and acts like a rocket thruster and blasts the asteroid towards us. So that's kind of cool. So we could do that maybe for the Earth. Explode some nuclear bombs. It shoots a little mushroom cloud and some stuff out, and it pushes the Earth a little bit. So we would need, only to detonate an atomic bomb every second for about 500 years. These would be big atomic bombs too, not little baby Hiroshima bombs. Which, of course, needless to say, suddenly our global warming becomes insignificant compared to the damage we'd be doing with one bomb every second for 500 years. Not to mention the fact that 500 years we would have been able to address global warming normally without nuclear bombs. So yes. So in this movie, we are given the premise that Russia and America set off two bombs and to hurtle us to the sun. They'd have to be doing that every second for hundreds of years to even start to shift us. So you can rest assured that we don't really have to worry about that. We would destroy ourselves well before we were able to move the Earth, which is nice. I was reading somewhere else's, and I didn't bring it here, but analysis on what happens if every human on Earth ran in the same direction all at once. Could we slow the Earth down or speed it up?
That's interesting.
Because we've got 8 billion of us, and we all sort of go, let's run east to west, and that would that speed us up? If we ran from the east to the west, yes, that would speed the Earth's rotation up. Sunrise would come earlier. The answer is no, you can't. Not significantly. There's just not heavy enough people. But the theory would be that if everyone did it for long enough, we would slowly increase the speed of the Earth's rotation.
Yeah, right. Wow.
So it's just some interesting things here. It's obviously for the sake of a plot and a story, you need to sort of suspend certain realities, and whether that be the reality that Martian soil is actually toxic itself, so you couldn't grow potatoes in it. Easy enough just to go, well, let's pretend that it wasn't so toxic. That's one little thing aside. And in fact, if you came along to our film festival, you would have heard H.M. Moore, science, environmental scientist and author, talking about terraforming Mars and addressing the soil problem. So I mean that's it. That's the science then of trying to shift the Earth with nuclear bombs. A foolhardy endeavour, but one worth knowing the boundaries of anyway.
And I mean, the whole point going back to this film as a warning is, of course, you could do something that does tilt us a little bit and then you can't go back. And that's the thing with all those ideas you're talking about. I just keep thinking, Yeah, but if you're dropping all those bombs, like, what's the outcome of that?
Yeah, that's whenever I hear the geoengineering solutions to global warming, I just sort of think it's just so much easier. It would actually be easier, cheaper, and more reliable for just to stop all oil and coal production.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, we'd run out of electricity. We'd all go blackout. There would be food riots. There'd be all sorts of devastation and problems. But you know what? We wouldn't be producing carbon dioxide. And within 50 or 100 years, we'd go back to normal.
Yeah.
That's a far... Yeah, and we know the outcome of that.
Yeah.
Like, the outcome of that would be, yeah, a lot of people would probably starve and there'd be wars and it would be nasty. But once it did return back, you could start introducing, renewable energies and continue on.
Yeah.
But if you, I don't know, seeded the atmosphere with iron or sulfur, whatever it is they want to do, or you put a shield barrier against the sun, all these sort of outrageously big geoengineering, you're sort of going, is that going to, what sort of other horrendous follow-up is that going to have? Yeah, is that the old woman swallowing a fly problem?
I was just
isn't
going
it?
to say, it's introducing the cane toad to Australia
Yeah,
to solve one problem that leads to then a whole other problem.
And you're let's just stick to the way we know works. It's
How about we just
uncomfortable.
reduce carbon? Yeah, let's just more fastly reduce carbon.
Well, we actually have the finance and technology to do it immediately. We could basically shut down coal plants as quickly as we could build replacements for them. Either that be nuclear, hydro, wind, solar, batteries. We could do that probably in a decade. We could totally replace all carbon use. We'd have to make a lot of sacrifices, but maybe that's worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
Certainly better than possibly destroying the world.
That's right. Okay, so that brings us to the end of The Day the Earth Caught Fire. Go check it out. It's a great sort of classic sci-fi horror film from Britain from 1961. Go check it out. Let us know online what you think about it and whether it should have been a classic or not. That would be great to know. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, give us a rating, give us some 5 stars or leave some feedback. And likewise, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and
YouTube,
on our website, and of course TikTok.
And of course YouTube.
I said YouTube.
You said TikTok twice.
TikTok twice.
Yes, okay. I just want to say I've just put up our workshop. Our podcasting workshop has gone up there, and more workshops will be going up there shortly. If you missed out on the film festival, you can catch that stuff there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to give us a bit of a helping hand.
Yeah,
it helps immeasurably with our reach and lets more people discover the joy of science fiction.
It does. So next episode will be 90. Which means
this was
a classic.
This was 89. That's 90.
Yeah,
90, a classic. Well, I reckon let's continue, plumbing the depths of the earlier decades, and this time it's the Blob. The Blob, the 1958. I was just trying to remember the name because The Blob is a bit of a classic of the creature feature genre.
It is.
So we had things like Creature of the Black Lagoon, which is 54, I believe. You had Them, and it came from the outer space, any number of these creature feature films. The Blob,
We're going to The Blob.
So good that it got remade in 1988, 30 years later.
It's been remade a few times.
And the 58 one, I'm excited to see. I haven't seen that one.
Oh, haven't you?
No, I saw the 88 version, which itself is quite a good film.
I've seen this one. I've seen this one a couple of times.
So I'm looking forward to seeing this one. Put it in context there with the Body Snatchers, this film. Sure. Let's see how that goes.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
Until then, see ya.
Bye.